And it's a strange thing that what we're asking is, in order to participate in society, I would like you to spend 16 years sitting down on a desk learning from a teacher, which is sort of really strange. Because you would have thought that if I'm going to try and enable you to participate in society, I would be doing that by letting you participate in society and not being locked away in a room with a teacher. And I call this the gap, because there's a gap between expectation and reality. There's a gap between, I live in a little village, we don't have tarmac, the houses aren't very good, we have cows walking down the street, and I'll put it on the internet, and some people go, whoa, and I will fill it with 70% occupancy in 2 months. Because the reality is that the world is moving very much faster than the world of education. And in fact, the cyclical change in the world which we live in is in the order of months and years, and the cyclical change in education is in the order of decades. So I will go to schools and I will go to ministries of education, and they will talk about making change in 5 years. And that is the entire time a kid spends in high school. And that's just to make a shitty little change. So when I hear Teach for Romania talking about it'll take us 18 months or 2 years, I'm saying that's the difference between being 14 years old and 16 years old. And if you remember when you were 14 years old, how long it took before you were 16, do you remember that? And we're just saying, and that's quick. So we have a difference. Now, I was asked to say something about me. I come from London. You know, London's a great city. We've got a wheel and we've got a clock. You know, we're moving forwards. And we have a bridge and we have a spiky building. The interesting thing about the spiky building is that we are measuring the height of buildings. We've got the tallest building in Europe, or whatever, is measured from the ground of the building to the highest point. And so the highest point is the radio mast. And so the nonsense is, when we're talking about high buildings, you get a building which is just going to be higher than the other one because you have an 80-meter radio mast. And actually the measurement which we go through in education is a weird measure. I'm not convinced that if you are able to regurgitate, to memorize and reproduce stuff which you get examined on, that necessarily means you're going to be great when you leave school. And in fact, in our country, what we're saying is we have an awful lot of very well qualified people, and they can do nothing. And that brings us into an area of difficulty. So there's a picture of St. Paul's Cathedral, just for fun, and a picture of a building which has been put on an angle so it does not interrupt the views of St. Paul's Cathedral, and that costs an extra 100 million sterling to try and protect the views. 100 million just to protect the views. So we're spending a lot of money around the place. And what we do have is we have a big gap between rich and poor, and an increasingly big gap. And paradoxically, the richer you are, the cheaper you can buy things. So if you're very wealthy, you can take advantage of all sorts of opportunities on the internet. If you're poor and you don't have that, everything costs more money. So the gap is growing faster and faster and faster. Has anybody here ever found that on the internet, a quick browse, when you're in a shop, you can find another shop which has got the same thing cheaper? And you'll find there are many apps where you scan in the barcode and it'll tell you which shop has got the cheaper deal right here, right now. If you don't have that smartphone, you will pay more money. So we have all sorts of things going on, all sorts of things. And I've just got some photographs of the tube. And the gap is between the people who are successful and the people who are watching other people be successful. And that's a hell of a gap to go through. So we all know education is important. At a corporate level, in this room, we all know that if education works better in Romania, then the economy will grow faster, GDP will go up, I will do better. But I don't want to be the one investing, let them. And that's part of the problem. So that we are inherently greedy. So if I was introducing myself to you a few years ago, I'd be Marcus Orlovsky, a schoolboy. Then I became an economics graduate. Then I became a trainee at Deloitte, which is a firm of management consultants, which is now called Deloitte. I then became a director of Ernst & Young, which has gone through a complete rebrand and is now called EY. I loved when Price Waterhouse and Coopers & Lybrand merged and went to an advertising agency to say, we're Price Waterhouse, we're Coopers & Lybrand, what should we call our new name? And 300,000 sterling later, Price Waterhouse Coopers. I love this. And that's how you made your money at McKinsey. And then a little bit after that, I became a director at Stanhope, a tiny company. There were 8 of us, and we thought, let's do something cool in London. And we managed to borrow 6,000 million sterling. So that's what, 9,000 million euros, and build a new financial center. So we were developers. And I remember going to Germany. I went to go Berlin just after the fall of the wall. And I spoke to some lawyers, and I said, I'm looking for opportunities in Berlin. And the guy said, and so Dr. Marcus Orlovsky, he said, and he said, how much do you think you're investing? And I said, I don't know, maybe 10 billion Deutschmarks. And he said, Mr. Orlovsky, you don't understand. In Germany, we say a billion is 1,000 million. And I said, yeah, same with us. So it's about 10,000 million. I'll write it out for you, 10,000,000,000. And he said, my God, you need to go to Frankfurt. And there is something, if you haven't seen it done, it's very difficult to imagine it could be done. You know, it's very hard. It's as hard to imagine if you live in a shitty house in a shitty little village that somebody will come along and say, you think you live in a shitty place? Come here, book it, we'll charge you rent. And actually, I think people are going on ecotourism just to say, I've been to a shittier place than you have. And it is going on. It is going on. It's called dynamic modern camping, you know. And you get this stuff. The reason for it is because as an individual here, you can communicate to maybe 2,000 million people around the globe instantly. Just by twittering, just by getting something decent on Google. That's been impossible at any other time. But I don't know how many schools are preparing young people for the fact that they can contribute to society as opposed to absorb learning. So a few years after that, Marcus Orlovsky on Green, a few years after that, I don't know what I want to do because I'm so amazed at how many different opportunities there are. I've got no idea. And every day I walk along and I see something new. I go, yeah, I want to do that. I don't know if that's happened to anybody else. It becomes very disturbing when you hear yourself talking to a friend, well, for the last 30 years, I've been in procurement, and I've been looking after the stationery which comes in when we order it. You sort of look at that and you go, I wonder if there's something else I could do with my life. And actually, that's what we're requiring, because circumstances are moving very, very fast. So I don't know where we teach people the ability to see new things and to act fast. I don't know where we get that. And maybe that's what education is as opposed to being taught. And I guess in this room, most of us have learned the things which are important for us to do, the stuff which we do, not because we were taught it in a classroom, but we've learned it. And so maybe what we can do is we can accelerate 14 years by letting kids do things. So that's me. So I'm 57. I consider myself to be a youngish 57. My panel sort of say, don't get too close to the end. You could have a heart attack, 57. And some people here are probably thinking, do I have a decent medical doctor? And the hotel is quickly checking on their insurances. But I don't know what I want to do. I've done a few things, as each of us has. Just because in our country, what we have done over the last 10 years is to say that a top-down approach to education, especially if you have politicians involved, is basically fucked up. The only way of getting education working is to say if we've got professional teachers and we've got kids who want to learn, is to let them get on with it. The question then is how do we prevent it from them going off and having sandwiches and drinking wine? And so what we have is we have an audit group who go around to make sure schools are doing the right things. But we are struggling with how to measure the results. And we are caught in a trap between, is it about examinations? Because if you set an examination and you get the curriculum, it's already going to be 3 or 4 years out of date. Or do we work on how many people get jobs when they leave school? And in our country, we have a big debate about, do I teach you to pass the examination, or do I teach you to be successful in life? And that is causing a real problem, especially if teachers themselves have decided to opt out from a commercial existence in life and become a teacher. So in a lot of cases, everything which they say is based upon observation rather than participation. And that's where Teach for Romania, actually teach afterwards, is probably even better than teach first. And you could imagine a world where each of you could spend maybe 1 day per year teaching something in a school. You would probably find that the impact of that would be greater than putting money into kids from graduating from university to teach, because they still don't know. And that's what we're struggling with. So against that struggle, we have allowed our education process to become a bit more open market. So each school has to compete to get students, because with students comes the funding. So if you've got no students, you get no funding, so you've got no school. So what do you do to attract students? So that's getting this market and saying our education is as good as theirs, it's slightly better than that, to allow choice to happen. And we're saying to school leaders, you have got full budgetary responsibility. And that enables the climate to be made where they can take a decision about taking 20 young teachers or 15 older ones, or starting to say, we'd like to pay for you to come in and all the rest of it. And against that background, I am a chair, so I'm the chair of governors, board of directors of 8 primary schools, so we've got a couple of thousand kids in it, and 38 secondary schools. So altogether, I guess we've got 50,000 kids in the schools, of which I'm on the main board. But that is an aside to my normal job. I also work, really work. Although some work is more important than other work. So that's where I fit in. And the framework is the one which has allowed that to take place. And I have to say that allowing to take place means that the government is now running after the schools. So the schools are developing things, and the government's saying, well, we should get everybody to do that. Except we know that when the government says we'll get everybody to do that, it'll always be slower than if everybody just gets on and does it. And maybe the framework to be set in enabling us to compete is going to be much faster than we think. China, the People's Republic of China, this year had 11 million graduates coming from university. 11 million. And the goal by 2 years is to have 30 million graduates. So I don't think the piece of paper is going to be enough. I'm a graduate. Yeah, so are 30 million Chinese. Oh, shit. And they all speak Chinese and English and German. Oh, fuck. And that's the world which we're working in. So maybe we're being caught unawares by the speed of change. So I think we need to stop thinking of kids as a commodity. I'll show this picture. You've got to tell me when I've got to stop. But we talked about kids as a commodity. And actually, even if you look at teddy bears, all made in the same factory by the same people, they're all slightly different. Does anybody remember being given a teddy bear which you were scared of as a kid? Or giving a teddy bear to somebody and they're scared stiff. But equally, if you go into a shop looking at mass-produced teddy bears, you might say, I'm not going to buy that one, that looks mean. One of these looks particularly nasty. One of these looks a bit dopey. Well, I'm a teddy bear, what do you expect? Whereas the other one saying, I'm a teddy bear, but I aspire to be a political teddy bear. I'm going to take charge of this group. And they all come in different shapes and sizes. So I'm not convinced that all 16-year-olds are all 16-year-olds, or all 18-year-olds are all 18-year-olds, or that we all develop at the same speed. I'm not convinced that if at the age of 16 you cannot pass an examination in theoretical physics, that means at the age of 18 you wouldn't be able to pass it well. It's just that we have these milestones. And I think we're deluding ourselves, because when we all leave school, I doubt here if everybody said, look, before I talk to you, I'd like to know what qualifications you've got just to make sure I'm not talking to an idiot. I think we don't care about that. And I don't think we also say, how old are you? No, you're not junior. You're too junior. So these things go on, except there are a hell of a lot of people. I'm just going to show a few images for a moment. We have no idea what lives these two people are going to live, or where they're going to live them. And we have no idea what these kids could ultimately become. And I'm not convinced that by setting in place a motion that you should have been able to do this by this year is necessarily going to allow us to create the people who created Facebook, or created Google, or created Starbucks, or created McKinsey, or created Teach for America, or Teach First, or Teach for Romania. I'm not convinced, because most of the things which we so value are things which didn't exist before. And if our role in society is just to do things which have always been done somewhere else, then we are going to die when another country can do it cheaper, or even worse, when it gets automated. So the only thing which we have left is our humanity, and humanity is about change, about dealing with people, and about making the world in which we live better, isn't it? It's not about getting up in the morning, doing something for most of the day which I hate, going home, and then doing something which I love. So that can't be right. So where can that take us? Well, it can take us into saying in education, if you see that girl who's excited, every day should be a day of excitement. Every day. And the people in this room could help. We can all help. We don't have to say, oh, well, the schools are run by the state, they're told what to do, there's nothing to do with us. And as kids get older, there comes a point at which they start deciding, well, what's my role in life? What tribe do I join? Where do I go? And in our country, we have a lot of people who just end up like this. And they end up like this surprisingly fast. In our country, 40% of kids aged between 18 and 24 are unemployed. 40%. Because if you're 18 and you've got qualifications and you're competing against somebody who's 60 who's got experience, the employer is usually going to take on the 60-year-old because you can trust them. And there's no qualification on trust. And that's what's happening in our country. Because people are getting older, because people are starting to say, I want to be able... Actually, I wouldn't mind working in a shop for 2 years, and then I work somewhere else for 2 years. They're taking the jobs which 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds might have been. We also have a problem in that we have a lot of people from a country called Romania who are coming over to our country, who are well-educated, speak English, speak Romanian, speak German, and they take a load of jobs as well. But I guess in Romania what we're going to have is we're going to have 30 million Chinese coming over, somehow cramming through the borders. So all this is changing, and it's changing very fast. And if you just want to see the change, if we were at a conference 10 years ago, everybody would be writing notes. We'd all be writing notes. I don't know when the last time you actually wrote a letter was, but most of us have to think, I wonder when did I actually write a letter, as opposed to send an email. And I looked earlier, and loads of you were going up to the screen, taking photographs with your telephone. Now, if 10 years ago I said, you're going to carry a phone, and the most of the use will be to take photographs with it, you'd say you're insane. So this is a photograph taken of the Vatican in 2007, just in 2007. And here's one taken last year. I don't know if you can see the difference, but look, that's the difference. And it's everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. It's everywhere. So when I talk about education, I talk about things like this. This is a kid, Dear Santa. He had to write his Christmas wish list. And the poor little boy had to copy out all the shit you get on an Amazon code. You know? So this is what's happening, ladies and gentlemen. It is happening right here, right now. And stupid things are happening when you don't use your brain. Look, this is our country. We have in Wales a requirement to have signs in English and in Welsh. Now, not many people speak Welsh. Okay, so this says no entry for heavy goods vehicles, residential site only. You got the idea? So it's to try and keep construction traffic away. And underneath it's translated to nidwifnisher, ad hardware, hishu. I think that's why Welsh didn't succeed very well. However, I put this into Google Translate. Has anybody used Google Translate? You know, it's an amazing thing. I put it in, and it came out, I am not in the office at the moment. Send any work to be translated. You know, which is nidwif and hira. See? So this is going on, ladies and gentlemen. It's going on every day. And yet we're saying to people who are being born, let's work out how we're going to educate them to enable them to make their way and make our society better. And I don't know if it's good enough to rely upon the way we did it, or the way in which our parents did it, or even to accept 5-year or 10-year change programs. I'm not convinced that's good enough. And we get caught in mindsets. And the trouble with education is it really instills. So I'm going to ask you a question. Which of the vertical lines is longer? Who thinks it's the one on the left? Who thinks it's the one on the right? Who thinks... So what do the rest of you think then? What do the rest of you think? Oh, really? Really? Well, you see, they're not. The one on the right... the one on the right is 20% shorter. So why did we immediately say, without thinking, they're the same size? I mean, do you really think that me, as a 57-year-old, hasn't seen this before? Were you really thinking, idiot, he doesn't know this one. We know this in Romania. It's because we get taught it. And the trouble is we get taught it so hard, we stop thinking. And I think that's part of the problem in sitting in classrooms being taught, is that some of the stuff we get taught, we then don't apply it anymore. And that is a major, major, major problem. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Which one is longer? Who thinks it's the one on the left? Who thinks it's the one on the right? Few of you. Who thinks they're the same size? And is confident that they're the same size? A few of you. Well, they are the same size. But you can get completely messed up just by looking at these things slightly differently. Now, I'm going to flip very fast. You haven't told me to shut up, but are you going to tell me?
We still have time.
Do we? Okay, so I've got another hour, so here we go. If you just look at the opportunities, what we're starting to find is that 14-year-olds can start making a living. And in fact, in our country, this guy, who was 16 when this newspaper article came out, sold his app to Yahoo earlier this year for $30 million. He's 17 years old. Now, that wasn't possible 5 years ago, but it's possible today. It's possible right now that companies might find they'll get a better website design created by a 14-year-old or 15-year-old. It's never been the case. It's always been that we've gone hierarchically up to a leader and then down to a subordinate. And now we have peer-to-peer communications. And I think those are the changes which are taking place. This is a really bad picture of Mark Rogers, who runs Apple Europe. It's very interesting. Mark Rogers, who runs Apple Europe. Apple is a successful company. It makes 10 products, only 10, but it makes lots of them. And what he was saying is we get hundreds of people applying for jobs, superbly qualified. The only thing which we're interested in is attitude and common sense. Trouble is, we don't have any qualifications for common sense, and we don't have any qualifications for attitude. But I bet everybody here knows some people, and you look at them on paper, and they seem fantastically well qualified. You meet them, and you go, there's no way I would ever employ you. Ever. And then when they say to you, but I am your employee, you go, oops. But that's the reality. So what's starting to happen is that we're starting to actually make fundamental changes in recruitment and hiring across the world. In fact, the Apple thing is that they reckon they're successful not because of the things they have done, but the things they haven't done. So it's about how you choose what to do. And that becomes very interesting because this guy runs an international recruitment process for graduates, and everything which they do comes down into one 30-second YouTube video. And on that basis, he placed 100,000 graduates around the world last year on 30-second interviews. So 15,000 hours of tuition ends up in 30 seconds as an interview. But then if you think about it, if you had somebody applying to you for a job and they come from China or come from Taiwan or come from India, how the hell are you going to go through that process? We don't know what their qualifications are. We don't know anything. But if you can see them for 30 seconds, you might go, yeah, okay, maybe. I'll take them to the next stage to interview. And this is what's happening right here, right now, ladies and gentlemen. Right here, right now. So one of the things about education, which we're sort of saying across the schools we run, across the people I talk to, and so 2 days ago I was in the Netherlands talking about education, and next week I'm in San Jose. And around the world, everybody's struggling with the same thing, with millions of people who have been employed and educated as teachers who are doing the same thing as they've always done, with a few twists. And yet we have people who are demanding more. And the question, as I say, is why are you doing this? Are you doing this so that people can get jobs or they can generate an income throughout their lives? And when you start looking at the second one, being able to generate an income throughout their lives, all of a sudden, everything changes. Everything changes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we do need much more of an interaction between the world of people doing things and the world of people preparing people to enter the world of people doing things. And if the gaps get bigger, then the opportunity gap starts becoming enormous. So what can I do? Well, for example, in schools, we tend to find around the world there's a bit of a fear of failure. If you get asked a question, you get it wrong, then something happens. Even to this, look, write the answer of 36 plus 47. You must show you're working. So this kid wrote 83. I'll show my working. There I am. And I have to tell you, I would recruit that person because I think that's bloody funny. But in a school, you'd be marked down. So if you're not careful, you'll become boring. I mean, really seriously boring. And so that's where we go in this changing world. Now, if I can quickly flip through, do you see, I sort of did all this stuff and I thought, won't this be good? And then I came along and I thought, oh, this is all shit. Has anybody else ever done that when you're preparing something? We work with the little kids. So look, these are 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds making TV programs and making movies and all the rest of it. And we get them to make movies and show them at the local cinemas. If you're an 8-year-old and you made a movie and showed it at the local cinema, the chances are you already know how to deal with people, how to persuade people, how to do all this sort of stuff. It's simple. But most schools don't allow you to do that because a teacher doesn't know how to do it. Kids do, teachers don't. And that becomes an amazing thing, an amazing thing. So we do that all over the place. So what I quite like doing is to understand this hierarchy between teachers and students and who is doing the learning. Because if all you can get as a student is the teacher teaches you what they know, your knowledge is going to be based upon a subset of what the teachers taught you. Because a lot of it you'll have forgotten, right? You might already know more stuff than the teacher knows. But that's not in the lesson because that goes afterwards in the lesson. It's like conferences like this. You know, you're sitting here patiently hearing an old bloke like me talking away, and you're going, this is boring, but it's okay because there'll be coffee afterwards, and at the coffee I'll talk to people and I'll learn things. Has anyone else ever found that the conference you go to is not because of the stuff which happens to you at the table, but it's stuff which happens over coffee? So I quite like this, and I've been saying this for years, about if you're a teacher, Why should a student listen to you? What is so special? I'm the teacher, you have to. I think that's a bit old, don't you? And we're finding that this sort of approach, if you can get teachers just to loosen up, has amazing impact. I mean, amazing impact. If we can go back to that PowerPoint just for a moment, I'll just, because I think I'm boring everybody to tears, am I right? Yes, yes, yes. Anyway, so there's a PowerPoint here in a moment, but they might be, why, I don't know. Let's see. I can draw it. Can you quickly draw that next slide? Yeah. So it's an interesting thing when you start attacking that, because a lot of students spend their time like this in school, you know? And so it's fantastic when you start unlocking it, and when you allow teachers and students to make mistakes and learn from it between themselves. Do you see what I mean? I'm talking about a learning community. It's probably what we do every day in our offices, at our work, every day. And that becomes very powerful, because then you can unlock work like this. This was done by a 7-year-old. It's just they were given time to finish. Are you finished yet? Whereas in school, usually, right, stop doing the pictures, we're now going to do something else. I haven't finished. This was done by a 6-year-old. It took them 3 weeks to finish it. They did it over time. They were making it better and better, and then they were proud of it. In a lot of cases, kids never get the chance to be proud of what they've done because they've had to stop, because a teacher has said, stop, we're now doing something else. Do you see how simple this is? We get kids to answer the phones. We say we want people to come out of school with good communication skills, but they're not allowed to answer the phone in the school, because the phone is answered by somebody who doesn't want to answer the phone. Do you see the stupidity of it? The stupidity of it. And when you take it to the next level, this is a little school we got in touch with us, so we want to get science exciting. How do we do that? And it looked like that inside. How do we get it exciting? So we got a nightclub company in, they change the ceiling, and then the kids do science. You know, and the kids just experiment with colors, and then the kids have a good time. Why not? School is supposed to be the best times of our lives. This is a special school. You know, a special school is for kids who've got problems. Usually they're hidden behind gates, out of the way, over there. We said, well, how are these kids ever going to make their way in society if they spend all their time being closeted in a school behind gates where they're being looked after? So we said, well, the first thing is let's show people what they can do. And in fact, this is a front entrance. We changed the signage. Look, this is the signage of it. Look, it says cafe, retail, spa, conference hall, and education. You see, so people come in for a coffee. And if you come in for a coffee, guess who serves you? A kid who's got problems. How good do you feel if you say, oh, yeah, we should go there, putting back into the community? And do you care if that coffee's slightly more expensive? I think you feel proud that it's slightly more expensive. It looks like that in the evenings. It's open from 8 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, because they have dinners as well, served by all these kids. And what you tend to find in things like that is you get people wanting to do a conference. You know, Barclaycard, Visa, Shearson Lehman would have done before they went broke, but people have conferences because they say, instead of going to the Marriott, why don't we go there and put some money back into these poor kids? Do you see what I mean? And so all sorts of things start developing. You then get shops developing. This is the spa. This is a school, ladies and gentlemen. It's a special school, which people said will never happen. You can't do this. Don't be insane. Except this thing is just on now to generate 1 million sterling net revenues 6 months after opening. So don't tell me it can't be done. The thing is, what is standing in our way? What's standing in our way? It's a school, it's a special school. Yes. People won't go there. No, but if the coffee's good, they might. And actually, if they're nice people having a nice coffee and nice cakes by people who are less advanced in society, they might pay more. I'm not after charity here. Do you see? And if it's not charity, it's sustainable. And that's what we want to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's where the future could be. It could be in starting to reprofile what is the purpose of education. It could be starting to reprofile what is my purpose in this whole thing? Do I just watch it or do I participate? And then how might I be able to change some of the structures to allow this to happen? The trouble is, if we don't, 30 million Chinese with graduates, 40 million next year, are going to rather make us do it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say.